Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Untitled Reviews. Now, if somebody had said to me many, many years ago that analog keyboards would ever enter the mainstream, I'd have particularly eaten my hat. But it now looks like that Razer's latest behemoth, the Huntsman V2 Analog, just might be out to prove me wrong. It's by no means a cheap product to get the privilege of controller-like accuracy, with it clocking in at roughly $249.99, making it roughly the same price as a brand new Xbox Series S. But in terms of the peripherals market, it's comparable to Corsair's K100 that comes with laser switches and Logitech's G915 Lightspeed that comes with its slim, low-profile construction, which you'll hear me praising on a few videos actually over the course of the last couple of years. It's a product designed for those real hardcore gamers. So let's see how it stacks up with the pros. And inside the box, it's a simple case of getting the keyboard itself, complete with a plush magnetic leatherette wrist rest and a couple of bits of documentation. So, onto the important stuff then. How is the Huntsman V2 Analog built, and how sturdy is it really? Well, before we get into that, I just want to say one thing. You might notice that the quality of this video is probably significantly better than the last few, considering that we're now filming with a Canon EOS M50 in 4K at 25 frames a second, and we've got two massive kind of studio lights on either side of the table where we film these videos, so hopefully there'll be no dodgy shadows as I'm moving my hands around or picking the keyboard up and whatnot. But onto the showpiece itself. Well, given the high price, you might expect that the Huntsman V2 sports a rather military-grade construction, and to be honest, you couldn't be more right. I mean, there's absolutely no deck flex whatsoever. It's certainly a rather thick keyboard, as you can see there, even with that skeletal design. It's got to be thick enough to attach the wrist rest that's just slightly out of shot. And to be honest, it's pretty much guaranteed to stay in place. There's little movement when you're typing on it, even with the feet up as well. It's got these signature sharp edges that Razer have become known for God knows how many years now, that harks back to their first ever iterations of the Black Widow, and probably even further back than that. And this kind of matte black colouring that's offset by the chroma lighting when that's on, it helps the Huntsman V2 Analog really to kind of look really, really classy, but also it's quite rugged with those sharp edges and that matte black colouring. It manages to please, as I say, both the bona fide gamers in the room with its flashy lighting and that kind of gamer aesthetic, but considering it's all black as well, it's also good for those people who just want a decent keyboard to slot right into their office setup. And there's a certain minimalistic look, given the fact that there's no multimedia keys apart from the ones across the top. There's no kind of programmable macro keys down the left-hand side that would make this an explicitly gamer-esque keyboard like Logitech used to do with their G710 many, many years ago that featured MX Browns. To add to this premium feel, it's not just on the actual construction of the Huntsman V2 Analog where this wins. It's also got these PBT keycaps that are usually reserved for more pricier keyboards on the market, so it's really no surprise that the Huntsman sports them here. Some others, Razer have actually included on a few of their other products recently, ABS plastic keycaps, but these PBT ones just add a little bit more quality, and I suppose justify that $249.99 price tag that little bit more. They're also built really with longevity and heavy usage in mind. And considering they're two-shot molded, that also means that backlighting shines through a fair amount better. It does right a couple of wrongs on some of Razer's more high-profile boards, like the Black Widow V3 Pro that we've taken a look at in the past. The wrist rest actually now has an attachment mechanism. There's one magnetic attachment mechanism that you can see there. And to be honest, it will stay in place a lot of the time, but it would have been nice if there was perhaps in these little slots here another attachment mechanism so that was a little bit more secure. There's no doubt that it's certainly a comfortable wrist rest to use. I mean, even though it may not be full leather, which would have been nice given the price of the keyboard, it's still comfortable feeling, and that little embossed Razer logo is also rather nice. There is a small problem though, and I say it's a small problem. It lies within the Huntsman's cable, which you can see I've got kind of tied up here, but you might just be able to see if I pop these off that it comes with a dual connection. It comes with a USB-C port to be plugged into your PC, and another USB-A port, and that USB-A port is used to power the USB 3 pass-through that comes with the Huntsman V2 Analog. Having a USB pass-through is probably a given in today's market, and it is really nice that Razer have put them on here. But to be honest, if they would have wanted to make this really a 10 out of 10 in terms of design, then they could have just had the cable as a bit of a splitter. But I understand that it's probably better to have the two of them connected together, just in order to keep things all in one place. Now, whilst it's all very well and good having a keyboard that looks the part, when you're spending roughly £250,000 on, you certainly want it to perform well. Not least when the Huntsman V2 Analog is a keyboard designed primarily for the esports professional. But I am pleased to say that it's on this performance side of things where the Huntsman V2 Analog not only sets itself apart from other keyboards at this price, but also where Razer have focused on a lot of their attention in developing this particular product. As suggested by the name, the key inputs that the Huntsman V2 Analog makes use of are now analog. This is essentially designed to replicate the controller-like inputs that you can get from either pressing down some triggers or moving around the analog sticks on a controller. And it now means really that key inputs are more progressive than they once were, as opposed to simply being a digital kind of on-off switch. And overall, the game experience that is offered by these analog switches is really nice. There is a bit of a learning curve attached to it, but once you get there, it's rather good. However, I did kind of find myself falling into some old habits on racing games, for instance, such as spamming the A and D keys down to turn forcefully, as opposed to using a more smooth motion that I would either with the controller or with the Logitech G29 wheel that I use every now and again. The game experience is actually helped along not only by the fact that these switches are analog, but also the fact they have a gaming-ready actuation force of around 40 grams, making them slightly lighter than Cherry's signature MX Reds that have been within gaming keyboards for basically as long as I can remember, if not longer. And also the fact that they're optical. Razer make a lot out of their optical switches, and the Huntsman V2 Analog is no different. It does, for all you gaming junkies out there, feature the more traditional functionalities such as full NKRO, that's N-key rollover, and anti-ghosting, as well as the ability within software to enter a gaming mode, so there's no real notifications, and you can disable the Windows keys. For those more in an office and you're looking for something with a decent typing experience, I am pleased to say also that the Huntsman V2 Analog will cater to your needs, even with a lighter set of switches. It's still decent enough to type on. However, the issue I have with linear switches, it's not just with the Huntsman V2 Analog, but linear switches in general. I've always been somebody, as you'll know if you go back and watch a few of these other videos where I've talked about keyboards and switches in general, I've always been somebody who likes a bit of tactile feedback, be it a bump on MX Browns or a click on MX Blues and others. And the only real sign of that, as you can hear, on the Huntsman V2 Analog, is when the switches bottom out. And unfortunately, that brings me on to the kind of real major issue with this keyboard. It is only one thing, but it could be considered quite a big one if you're in a busy office. You'll notice that it's quite a loud keyboard. For a product that's got no audible notice of tactility, be it with a click or a bump, as I say, the Huntsman V2 Analog can be quite loud. That's probably not helped along by its open housing, but Razer have always been good with an open housing, and the keyboard certainly looks the part, but the trade-off for that really is the noise that it emits. If you're in a bedroom on your own and you're building your RGB kingdom in there, then there's no real fuss. But with an office full of people, it's probably best to go on board with something with more ear-friendly switches. Be it something with O-rings or a slightly silent variant of switches. I know there's a lot of manufacturers out there, from Cherry themselves to others, including keyboards with, I say, MX Red silence or others. So if you want to save your ears, then the Huntsman V2 Analog might not be the keyboard for you.
Drop it.
Of course, there's always going to be some people who argue that, a product can't be a gaming keyboard if it doesn't have oodles and oodles of RGB-enabled lighting. Well, for those lighting junkies out there, I'm pleased to say that the Huntsman V2 Analog delivers once again. Really, Certainly in my opinion, there's been really no one better when it comes to out-the-box lighting than Razer with their incredibly powerful chroma lighting that's also remained crisp and sharp over these many years, and the Huntsman V2 Analog once again continues to sustain that reputation as one of peripheral's best lighting providers. As with other chroma-enabled products, the options within Synapse that we'll come onto a little bit later when it comes to presets and per key customization is once again sublime. But for this particular section, we're going to focus on the out-the-box lighting and how that fares. Well, you'll notice that right off the bat that it's not just the standard run of keys on the Huntsman V2 Analog that are being lit up. There's also these multimedia keys across the top, especially the volume roller in the corner. As a small side note, these particular multimedia buttons are nice and firm to the touch, and the volume roller is pleasant enough, as is the mute button on the top. It's certainly a better volume roller than Logitech's splinter-inducing one on the G915 that I experienced a couple of years ago. With the Huntsman V2 Analog, given its price, Razer have appeared to have gone the extra mile when it comes to lighting, as it's not only the multimedia keys and the actual normal keys that are lit up, but if I turn the keyboard on its side, you'll also see there's a nice little underglow on the bottom that helps to light up your desk and add a little bit of atmosphere to those long gaming sessions. This actually can be extended quite nicely if you attach the wrist rest. The wrist rest also has it also sustains that underglow, although it's quite difficult to see. It would be quite difficult to prop up the keyboard, but rest assured that there is a certain underglow on the bottom there. So certainly out the box, Razer once again impress with lighting, and that really should only improve when we get into the software. Now, whilst the Huntsman V2 Analog is all very well and good with its out-the-box functionalities, it really comes alive when it's teamed with Razer's long-time companion for peripherals, Synapse, now in its third iteration, aims to bring some of the best controller-like functionalities to your keyboard with the Huntsman V2 Analog especially. Now, there's a whole myriad of functions that you can implement with the Huntsman V2 Analog, starting off on the front page here with the gaming mode. So if you want to, you can turn this on, and so you have a choice of disabling either the Windows keys, Alt-Tab, or Alt-F4, or all three of them. Alt-F4 is particularly useful if you don't want to close your game accidentally. You can have a quick remap of the WASDs to your traditional controller joystick, so you just press the bind button, and it will bind those keys like so. And there's also a handy little shortcut to Windows keyboard properties if you want to fiddle with about in the settings there. However, as I say, the real functionality comes alive when you select a certain key. So if we select the W key, you can, on its default setting, change the actuation point of the keyboard. So I wanted to, and the actuation point is really how far you have to push the key down to activate it, as it were. So if you want it, so it's just a little quick tap, you can have it as a 1.5mm for a key like W that's used in pretty much all games these days. That's particularly useful. Although if you want to have it so you've got to push it down basically all the way to actuate it, so for a key you don't want to inadvertently hit, then you can have it all the way down at 3.6. But as much as that's a great function, it's a function that other firms like SteelSeries have been dabbling in for the last few years. Where the Huntsman V2 Analog shines is in these controller and joystick functions. The controller function, for instance, so with that W key, for instance, if you want to, you can now map it to basically any button that's on an Xbox controller. So if you want the W to act as your B key, your D-pad left, your right bumper, or the joystick presets, as you saw in the quick remapping earlier, then that's completely possible. And it's really on this particular function where the Huntsman V2 Analog shines. One thing to note though, once you do have those particular keys in analog mode, they are deactivated from their traditional digital mode, but and so you can't actually use them for typing. So, but there is a handy keyboard shortcut. It's the function and the menu button to switch between analog and digital mode. Whilst that's not really a keyboard shortcut that many people will use, it should become second nature to you if you buy this keyboard after a certain period of time. There's also the option to map it to a certain numbers on the joysticks or certain axes directions. This can be useful in particularly other games, but then the whole other host of functions that Synapse 3 offers are available to you. So that's mapping any key to a certain keyboard function. This is the whole macro thing, and in the end of that you can choose the actuation force and even add a secondary function. This is, as I say, useful in games like Counter-Strike, for instance, where you might be wanting to stab somebody and then chuck a grenade at the same time. So you push the key down a short of the way, it enables that first function. It bottoms out, it enables the second one. That can be particularly useful. It's a little bit fiddly to program, but it does work out quite nicely. Even if you want your Huntsman V2 Analog to act as a mouse, that's still the options here. So you could have your tab key for your left click, or your backspace key for your right click if you wanted to do that. And there's even the kind of custom release thing that sets an estimated key travel when the keys would be released after being actuated. So it also even programs the kind of up, not the down. Macro recording's relatively easy. Again, you can configure those in that particular menu and change the actuation point here. If you want it to to work between devices, you can have 2 or more Razer Synapse devices kind of working in tandem. There's 5 onboard profiles with the Huntsman V2 Analog, I believe, and you can switch between all of these here. It's a nice set of onboard memory if you want it to program it for different games or have different lighting presets and whatnot as well. You can switch between the lighting in here, so you can fiddle with the presets that I'll come to in a minute. There's also onboard functionality using a combo of the function and F11 and 12 to change the brightness of that individual lighting. Which I come on to the next one. Razer Hypershift is a marvelous function, which essentially doubles your entire functionality of the keyboard. It gives you a second layer. So as opposed to just having 104 keys of programming ability, there's now 208 keys, if you will. So you could press the shift key, and then that just opens up another layer with those particular buttons. You can even launch programs and websites here. So say you wanted the escape key to act as your shortcut to YouTube. You just input the YouTube URL, mash the escape key, and it opens up YouTube for you. Kind of how multimedia keys and productivity design keys work on Office keyboards. So you'd have an email icon that opens, say, Outlook, or a browser icon that might open Chrome or Firefox, depending upon your preference. Say there are you can fiddle with these, so you can have even more multimedia functionalities than the given keys offer you. So if you wanted more than just to play and pause, skip forward or backtracks, or just mute it, you can have all sorts of those as well. There's all sorts of window shortcuts in here, as I say. So if you wanted to have your F4 key to be mapped to launch Paint, then you're sorted basically. As well as having the ability to write emojis and text, you can even program that, or just disable the key completely. Now it's really on this side where the where Synapse shines, but the lighting is not something to be sniffed at. When you move over to this particular side, you can choose the overall brightness of it. So anything from 0 to 100. You can have an idle setting, so if your display goes off, you can turn off the lighting of the keyboard, or if you're away from your desk for any period of time from 1 to 15 minutes, then you can make sure the keyboard shuts off and everything's not blazing bright when you come back. Now, as I say, the lighting presets on order here are pretty good. So as well as your traditional static, wheel, spectrum, cycling and ripple options, as well as reactive, which is also quite pleasant, there's also the more off the wall options, such as your audio meter and visualizer that you'll see in the top corner, that matches your backlighting, dependent upon the audio rather well or not, to any particular audio you might be playing. So if you want your Huntsman V2 Analog to flash violently with every single gunshot that you're firing, then it can do that. Or if you want it to mimic, say, I don't know, a Phil Collins drum solo or one of Flea's marvelous bass lines on the various Red Hot Chili Peppers tracks, then you can do that as well. As well as you can link to multiple Chroma enabled devices with the advanced effects as well. And Synapse 3 doesn't just work for, as I say, the Huntsman V2 Analog. It's pretty much anything in Razer's back catalogue these days. And there's also the ability to connect it to everything from the Philips Hue lighting system and even the Amazon Alexa enabled devices, meaning that you can build your RGB kingdom basically anywhere you please, not just your office.
So, in conclusion then, is the Huntsman V2 Analog worth a pickup? Well, for those more seasoned gamers out there who are looking to really take their game to the next level, this is really an ideal product, as characterised by those fantastic analog switches. As I say, it's also a great product if you're someone with plenty of money to burn and don't really care about the cost. Well, you're not going to get a peripheral currently in this rate more expensive than the Huntsman V2 Analog, so if you want to splash the cash, that's also a product for you. As I say, given that it's not really designed for those on a budget, there are plenty of other keyboards that will offer exactly what you need for maybe a third or even a quarter or a fifth of the price of this one. And if you're looking to keep things down a little bit, then the loudness of the Huntsman V2 Analog is something to take into account. But with all that being said, it is a rather good product for those more esports seasoned and ready gamers looking to take their game experience to the next level. Now, I guess all that remains to be said is that if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. To follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Links should be appearing on the screen right about now. To go and check out the blog as well. There'll be a few new posts on there, be it music, current affairs, sport, or whatnot. There'll be something there to tickle your fancy, of course. And if you like the kit that we feature in this video, be it the Huntsman V2 Analog or any of the products that we've featured on the few videos on this channel, then there'll be Amazon links down in the description where you can pick those up. So thank you very much for watching.